everyone. Welcome to Walchet Talks. So we recently did an episode on innovation for law firms, and during that episode, we talked about the processes of Lean Six Sigma and how they're beneficial to lawyers, along with several other innovation techniques. If you're interested, I'll provide a link to that episode. However, today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into how we can apply Lean Six Sigma principles to lawyers. And to give you a little bit more context, Six Sigma processes originated in the US in Motorola. It's where you identify the causes of defects in a manufacturing process and figure out ways to reduce the variations in outcomes of the same process. Lean principles, on the other hand, evolved in Japan at Toyota and focused on improved efficiency through the elimination of waste. An example of waste could be waiting, overproduction, or defects. And the integration of applying lean principles along with Six Sigma is where you focus on removing waste and reducing deviations in the outcome. And this came to be known as Lean Six Sigma. Now, while both of these principles originated from the manufacturing sector, they have now evolved to be applicable in the service industry, including legal service delivery. And that's why we're talking about it today. We have Catherine Alman MacDonagh, an expert on Lean Six Sigma for lawyers, to help us break it down. Welcome, Catherine. So excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to join you.
Thanks for joining us, Catherine. So before we get into the questions, I'm going to give an audience a little bit of background about you. Catherine is a qualified lawyer and the CEO and founder of the Legal Lean Sigma Institute, which provides certified workshops and trainings on the principles of Lean Six Sigma for the legal profession. This itself is super unique because there are tons of Six Sigma courses online, but you would be hard-pressed to find one specialized for legal services. She's also an adjunct professor at the Law School of Suffolk University, where she teaches the Yellow Belt certification course in process improvement and legal project management. And she's also an instructor at the Legal Innovation Technology Certificate Program at Suffolk University. She's also authored a book on Lean Six Sigma for law firms. And most importantly, Catherine, you have a lot of accolades to your name. She also provides consulting services to teach lawyers how to apply Lean Six Sigma principles to legal service delivery. So we're really looking forward to demystifying Lean Six Sigma for lawyers with you today. So let's get into the questions. I'm going to start with something a little bit basic. How exactly is Lean Six Sigma relevant to lawyers?
Oh, what a good starting question. I think at its core, everybody wants and really needs to be more efficient, which for us means not just the old doing more with less. It's really about doing the right things the right way the first time, every time. And I thought you did an excellent job of explaining about Lean and Six Sigma. It's about creating simpler, faster processes and reducing the waste in our processes, and also controlling or reducing, if not eliminating, some of the undesirable variation. So if you think about all the rework and reinventing the wheel that we do in law, whether we're in a law firm or a legal department or some other kind of law office, we spend a lot of time doing things that don't really add a lot of value, and that deprives us and our clients of our more strategic thinking and the time to be a really good business partner to our clients. So we've got, value delivery, there's pricing pressure. It's an extremely competitive marketplace. There's war for talent, many choices for clients to choose from law firms and lawyers. So this is a great way to develop some real competitive advantages too, and collaborate with clients.
I couldn't agree with you more. But Catherine, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and ask you if you could give us a few examples of the application of Lean Six Sigma to lawyers. A few examples at a law firm or even a corporate legal department would be helpful.
Sure. Well, let's kind of divide them. There are business processes and there are legal processes. So let's talk quickly about business processes. You think about, those that are core to the business, whether it's a law firm or legal department, things like intake, a new hire process or onboarding, conflict checking. For a law firm, I mean, timekeeping, billing, collections, they're the lifeblood of a firm. So we have some really good examples of where a law department, it's Aon's global law department, collaborated with two of their primary outside counsel in an award-winning approach that we developed called the Legal Workout. And it's highly collaborative. It's a great example of what happens when you get cross-functional, diverse teams of people from different organizations working together, having the kinds of conversations that they want and need to have. There's all kinds of discoveries and solutions that are developed in just one day that are super easy to implement and have a huge impact. It just makes everything better for everybody. And it's the reason why I love doing this work, because it helps everybody work even better together. So by way of example, they worked on the billing process. They originally expected to find 8 to 10 steps in that process. They discovered there were 57 possible steps. And just by working together through a very structured conversation using Lean and Six Sigma principles, they were able to, within the first several months, get a 43% reduction in the number of invoices rejected, a 72% reduction of number of invoices rejected due to something very simple, incorrect timekeeper setup. So this is good for the firm. It's good for the law department. Everybody's under a lot of pressure in legal departments to manage their legal spend. So good example from a business process. Now, on the legal process side, we have a lot of things that are actually highly repeatable. Intellectual property processes, mergers and acquisitions, employment, litigation, especially components of litigation, things like document review, where there's just better ways to do things, and clients are no longer willing to pay firms for certain kinds of work the way they used to. So my favorite example comes from a commercial real estate transaction lawyer who handled an entire portfolio of this work on a fixed fee basis. And just by applying Lean Sigma principles, she was able to improve her response time from receipt of request to draft of the lease the same or next day, which is very important. People not only want speed, they want frictionless interactions, and they don't want to sacrifice quality. So no longer can we say, speed, quality, or price, pick two. That's not going to work anymore. Everybody wants all of them. But the real story here is that a client, they don't see legal issues. They see business problems or business opportunities. So the goal here is to get the client into their stores more quickly. So because of this lawyer's excellent process that was managed very well, so it's that combination of process improvement and project management, they were able to reduce the overall time from the receipt of the request from the client to an executed lease. They went from 168 to 62 days. So this allows the client to open their stores an average of 8 weeks earlier. That is worth tens of millions of dollars a year in increased revenue for the client. So that's what clients mean when they say, be my business partner. It's what they mean when they have things in their RFPs like, how are you going to help us achieve our business objectives and do things, better?
Excellent examples. I really liked when you said that they thought they were going to find in the law firm that they thought they were going to find 10 steps, but they found 57. It's also sometimes the gap in the complete mismatch. Like you think your process is this short, but when you actually do an audit, you realize it's that much longer and you can eliminate so many more steps in between without compromising.
Really true. Yeah. It's really true. Things like process mapping, people will always say things like, that was incredibly eye-opening. I had no idea that this is the way we're currently doing our work.
Yeah. So If a legal team wanted to start applying the principles of Lean Six Sigma, where do you recommend they start? Because no legal team, or rather not every legal team, will already have a certified Lean Six Sigma specialist on their team. So how do they go about implementing these principles?
Well, hopefully we'll be able to teach enough people. We're up to, thousands and thousands of legal and business professionals all over the world that we've trained. So hopefully they will have somebody on the team who's certified. But until that happens, and at the risk of sounding a little self-serving, I would say, learn the concepts, learn the tools, start being able to speak the language of process improvement, not only for your own benefit, but to be able to have really good business conversations with your clients, and not just clients that are in manufacturing. So developing those skills, taking some courses. And then I also think we always recommend to our clients that the first thing they do when they're building a program is to have a good process for surfacing, selecting, prioritizing, and resourcing projects. So there's a temptation to focus on what to improve. We recommend starting with deciding how you will choose what to work on, because it's more important to be, clear, aligned with strategy, transparent, and so forth.
And that's even one step before, right? So it's like identifying, how do we choose what is the best thing to start with?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a little cheesy maybe to say, but you only have one chance to do this work right the first time. So considering things like stakeholder engagement, change management principles, and so forth is very, very important.
Correct. Because once you've burnt that bridge or something goes down, well, it's very difficult to re-engage with those same stakeholders and get their buy-in on a new process. So I completely agree with you.
Yes, we know lawyers test very high on skepticism. So we want to come out of the gate and do things really well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like the idea of developing that skill set in-house rather than getting it from outside. Because if you do that in-house, then you always have the person who's also understanding the way the organization functions. And then they bring that skill set to that, which makes it much easier for them to implement and roll out, as opposed to a specialist coming in from outside.
100%. I mean, there's no one right way to do this. So having that alignment with the strategy, understanding the capacity and the capability, the politics, the current conditions. There's a million things that, we're experts in process improvement, but our clients are the experts in their organization. So, we will always deliver very tailored recommendations because of that. So, understanding the strategy is vitally important.
Yeah. So, Catherine, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and you actually brought this up in one of your previous responses, process mapping. What exactly is process mapping?
I think of everything as a process. So you're right. There's a process to process mapping.
Yeah. So what does that process look like? Or rather, what does that process look like?
Well, I'll give you my lawyerly, it depends. There are actually different kinds of process maps. And each process map will show us something different. So most people are familiar with something like a decision tree, or what we call a top-down process map, where we take all of the high-level steps, and then underneath we will put all of the tasks required to complete that step. And it's very comfortable for lawyers to do this. They're actually really great at process mapping because it's logical, it's linear, it's sequential, it's this, then this, then this. The tricky part is to not fix the way you're doing it as you're mapping it, because this is a very visual way of looking at the way you're currently doing the work. And so there are always many surprises. We never do this work with just one person. We do this work with the primary stakeholders, meaning the people who are closest to where the work is being done. And almost always, it's the very first time that everyone is actually seeing the whole process from start to finish. So there are always surprises. Some are great surprises. Almost all the time, we'll find a hidden best practice. And
interesting.
So I want people to know that process improvement isn't just about addressing things that aren't working terribly well. It's about being treasure hunters and looking at what's being done in a very siloed way, and then saying, well, okay, that's a really great way of getting that done. Higher quality, faster, and less resources. We're going for lowest cost resource that's capable of doing the task for that particular project. What if we had everybody do it this way? So, when we talk about these things in terms of best practices, we get a lot of traction that way. But there are other kinds of process maps. There's something called a swim lane diagram, where we take all of the functions that are involved in doing the process, and then we follow what they do. We create a lane, a swim lane for each function, and we start to track where things start crossing lanes, how things go out, they come back in. And you mentioned discovering those kinds of wastes. We call them downtime wastes: defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, which is the movement of things, inventory, motion, and extra processing steps. So when we see a swim lane diagram, we start to see how people are interacting with the process and each other. And those things always look, they just blow people's minds. So we do this in person, with sticky notes on a big wall. We have something that I really love is when law firms and their clients do this together. We see a lot of law firms doing this as part of client development, relationship building with their clients, whether they're the law department or the business professionals or everybody. Of course, in today's world, we work with a global clientele, plus pandemic. So we find ways to do this online now. But always it's very eye-opening, and it actually reduces a lot of stress for the lawyers who are typically carrying this around in their heads. So whether it's figuring out how to manage the project better, how to improve the process, how to improve communication, teamwork, succession planning as part of knowledge management. It's a really good activity. And then, finally, we always do this work, always with cross-functional, diverse teams. So in a very real way, this is the stuff that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. It supports team building. And so it's serious work for sure. We will typically start to uncover areas for immediate improvement, but it's also fun.
Yeah. And since you're including all of the different stakeholders at the beginning, you kind of are getting, I wouldn't say their buy-in, but you're involving them in their process, so they feel a lot more heard, at least, if not buying into the entire process. But that's exactly the first step.
Exactly. They feel heard, and everybody is seen. Quite literally, they are seen. And so that respect for one another is instantly increased. So it's really important. And I think, this is, like I said earlier, this is the stuff of competitive advantages, because I think it directly contributes to developing that continuous improvement culture That's what we're trying to build, that cultural piece. And it makes it okay for people to ask, why are we doing it that way again? Or, what if we tried it this way? And so when you get to that point where people are comfortable having those conversations, that's transformative right there.
Yeah. And I think the culture part is what is actually sustainable, because you can come up with the best process, but if you've not been able to inculcate that culture, that's what then it's not going to really be as successful. And in fact, I read this somewhere where they came up with a whistleblower policy on inefficiency. And it was so cool because at the law firm, they said anybody who has any sort of issue with any inefficiency, you have this email address and you can just go and whistleblow and call out the policy or process that is completely inefficient. And I thought that was just a fantastic way of making it attractive to the entire firm to suddenly look at different processes and identify inefficiencies and call them out.
I love it. It's a good example of if you have a process for surfacing these things and then selecting and prioritizing resource, all of that. It's very similar to Toyota's sort of famous for having, this cord, the red cord, that if the factory workers see something that has a defect on the line, they are empowered to pull that cord. So you think they have to be trained to know what to look for, but they have to have a process to follow. And what they do is they not only fix the thing that's being produced, they also fix the process. So they don't just continue to create more need to improve the thing. And that's what I want people to kind of get to in the law. And we spend so much time, we call it the firefighting doom loop, where we are faced with increasing requirements all the time from our clients, from regulators, compliance. There's, this is never going to stop. The requirements will always increase, and then our processes are not capable. And so we rely on the people. We have these, hero cultures where the people have to spend their time fixing and pacifying and, around and around and around we go, because nobody has time to improve anything. So we just keep fixing the thing. And I mean, for your listeners, just think about over the last week or month, how much time you've spent fixing something because it wasn't done right the first time. And, I invite you to dream with me, like imagine a world where you didn't have to spend your time doing that and being frustrated. Imagine you could spend your time being creative, spending time
and
with
that's it's not a utopian thought. You could actually do that by implementing principles.
Yes, you can.
And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is that Lean Six Sigma is not a one-time effort. It's a continuous improvement process, and one has to sort of maintain an environment where you are continuously looking for ways to eliminate wasteful processes and reduce variations or standardize legal service outputs. So how can you achieve that continuous environment within legal teams?
Well, for starters, if you learn about Lean Sigma, I mean, whether it's from us or someone else, I think it's easier to learn in the context of what works in law. But once you start to look at the world through a process improver's eyes, you almost can't unsee. You'll never look at things the same way again. So I do think, again, going back to the skill development recommendation, that in and of itself facilitates the ability to continuously look for ways to eliminate wasteful processes and reduce those variations. But I think it goes back to what we were just talking about. Do a great job on your first handful of projects. Choose wisely, resource properly, absolutely follow the frameworks. They're tried and true. There's a reason they work, and there's a reason we say do not skip steps, because that change management is quite literally baked into the way we do this work. And also, if you do have that process for project selection, that will help greatly.
Yeah. So I'm going to touch on one of the points that you mentioned, which is change management. And in your experience, have you found any specific change management techniques that you believe are particularly helpful with legal teams when implementing Lean Six Sigma efforts?
Well, I have to put on my professor hat for a second and kind of point to, I thought you did, again, a great job of explaining a little bit about Lean and Six Sigma and their origins. I became really interested in, I didn't know it was process improvement at the time, but I was a corporate counsel. And when I started to read about the 5 principles of Lean Sigma, it started to make a lot of sense to me. And the first one is specify value in the eyes of the client. And the 5th one is continuously improve in pursuit of perfection. So I think, this idea of specifying value, then reduce waste and variation, then make that value flow at the pull of the client, which means give the client what they want, the way they want it, when they want it. For align and empower employees, it has sort of continuous improvement as one of the underlying fundamental principles. So, we use a variety of techniques in addition to things like DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, or DMADV, or one of the process improvement frameworks. We also look at change management models. There's one that we particularly like. It's called the ADKAR model, which stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. And we like it because it's very aligned with DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And that's used everywhere in the world. And what I think our team is particularly good at is looking at various models and techniques that could be useful and applying them and combining them for the particular situation at hand. But yeah, we think that change management is incredibly important. It's so important that we're launching a new change management certificate program this year.
Looking forward to that. Actually, I feel like sometimes that's more important than other individual certifications, because you need change management for anything that you do. Any sort of change, you need to know, how do I introduce it? How do I get the buy-in of different stakeholders? Because the best of suggestions can fall flat if you don't get the change management right.
Absolutely. I think, there are attendance skills, things like facilitation that we, teach in our private programs that help with this. Obviously, as you pointed out, you will be hard pressed to find anybody teaching this in the context of what makes sense in a legal environment. But I think what else is unique about us is we combine process improvement and project management. And to your point, we say all the time, there's no point in being excellent at managing a terrible process. And there's no point in having a great process if there's no one to manage it well. And I have to give one of our clients credit for saying that. But it really points to how powerful it can be when you combine these two things. And baking in that change management, strategy work, planning, organizational change and development. I think it's the best work you can possibly do, because you help teams become even higher performing and higher functioning. So it's really gratifying and wonderful work. So I'm always excited when I get a chance to share a little bit about what we're doing.
And that has a ripple effect too, because once you get that ball rolling, because it's continuous, they're always looking at ways to improve. So you can always see each quarter they're getting a little bit more efficient, a little bit, more productive, because they're continuously working on how can I make this process better? So that's always gratifying too.
100%. People always ask, does this stuff work? Does it work in legal? And would it work here? Because
I have to say that's a very valid question. Does this work in legal?
I mean, I went and got my Six Sigma green belt, and I always tell people it took me about 10 months to figure out how I could apply it in legal. And I wasn't really able to find a lot of information about how I would apply it in legal. And that's kind of how the Legal Lean Sigma Institute was born. I just saw that there was a need, and a friend encouraged me after hearing me talk about this. Why isn't anybody teaching this in a context that's relevant? So I don't have time at work to figure out how to incorporate this. So, I mean, it really is unique. We can joke all we want about, oh, every law firm is different. Every legal department is different. But that's true. Law is different. As you pointed out, going back to the first thing that you said, we're not Motorola. We're not Toyota. We're not manufacturing things. We do brain work. So, I mean, it's unique enough. We have a registered trademark in Legal Lean Sigma. So it really is different, and it's not always intuitive, and it's wonderful work. It's actually very simple work. It's just not very easy. It's really challenging and exciting work, which is why I love it. It's the same frameworks that we use in our repertoire, but it's like if you give a pianist, a whole piano and say compose something new, it's the same keys that everybody has, but how you put those things together, that's, there's science and there's art. So I really love it, and I aspire to share my passion for this and hope other people want to learn about it too.
No, I think it is. I really like that analogy with the piano, because that makes total sense. On that note, Catherine, thank you so much for your time today. I think we've all learned a lot about Lean Six Sigma for law firms and corporate legal departments. And I think in implementing all of those principles is really going to improve all of our processes. So we're all looking forward to doing that. Thank you so much. We've learned a lot.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be part of your list of wonderful guests. I've enjoyed listening to everybody, so thank you for including me.
Thanks. Bye-bye.